What's up, fight fans? Ryan Thomas back for another episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. This time around, of course, Ryan Thomas here back again to give you my thoughts on the UFC 260 event that was this past weekend. Francis Ngannou taking on Stipe Miocic for the second time. He gets it done. He finishes Stipe in the second round to become the UFC heavyweight champion. And for me, when I recap all these events on the show, I really enjoy it, as well as my coverage of the Bills and everything like that. But we got the NFL draft coming up. We got the NHL trade deadline is April 12th, 10 days away from that. We got some really big news in the sports world that, this is the first show that I've done in a little bit now. I had 3 guests on all in one day. I spread those shows out. Lou Michel was the first guest. Dan Fates was the second guest. And then Bruce Nolan, Bruce Exclusive himself, was the third guest. And I wanted to spread those out so that, the viewers and listeners could kind of tune into those on their own time. And, 3 shows in one day, it's a lot. So once I was, done with those shows, I wanted to kind of let that settle after UFC 260. I only hopped on the audio side of things to give you my preview and prediction, and to paraphrase and to sum it up and to kind of summarize what my preview and prediction was for UFC 260 for Ngannou versus Stipe. I thought that Francis would show up a much better version of himself, more complete mixed martial artist, and that in and of itself could lead Francis to victory. Did I think he would evolve at the level that he did? Did I think he would evolve at the rate that he did? No, I did not. Wow, that was a extremely impressive performance, more so than the knockout blow, because we've seen Francis throw those knockout blows and land the knockout punch. That's all he's done throughout his entire career. 100% finishing rate, 12 out of 16 victories, knockout victories. 4 out of those 16 victories were submission victories. When I say that Francis Ngannou finally becomes the next big thing, we knew that this was going to happen as fight fans. We knew that eventually there could come a time where Francis Ngannou was the UFC heavyweight champion. We had reason to doubt as fight fans whether or not he would achieve that due to the fact that in the last fight that he had with Stipe, didn't go his way. He was outworked, outprepared, just completely neutralized. So we had reason to think that, Stipe would be able to do that again in the second fight. Sometimes not much changes in rematches. Sometimes things do change in rematches. It's a case that we've seen in 100,000 times over, I feel, in combat sports. So for us to get this fight, Stipe and Francis head to head again, it was a great bout for the UFC heavyweight division. It was one that we knew would happen eventually. But for Francis to finally become the next big thing, this is so big for the sport of mixed martial arts. It's so big to have a heavyweight champion the caliber of Francis Ngannou in terms of a 6'5", 265-pound, just muscled up guy, all natural. The story of Francis Ngannou is really what gets me. But outside of that, the fight itself, talking about the fight, looking at the fight, what impressed me about the fight was not necessarily that Francis landed that knockout punch to finish Stipe. That was his easiest method of victory. What impressed me was the fact that Francis Ngannou has developed, I think, devastating takedown defense. Stipe shoots for the takedown. Early in the fight, Francis shrugs him off like he's nothing. Stipe transitions into another quote-unquote shot. That's what we call it in the wrestling world. Doesn't amount to anything. Francis just puts a stop to it. Francis avoids it, actually tries to then take Stipe down, and Daniel Cormier in the broadcast, who has plenty of experience fighting Stipe and as well as in fighting, says that would be a huge mistake for Francis to try to take down Stipe, but Francis kind of half shots and plays the grappling game a little bit to show Stipe that, hey, I got this, in my game now as well. I can go there if I want to. If it's going to, I can go there, but we're not going to go there. We're going to keep this on the feet. I'm keeping this on the feet. So, second round, we're moving, trying to find our footing. If we're Stipe, we're trying to avoid that big shot if we're Stipe. But I honestly feel that Stipe knew that he was not hurt or dazed, but knew in the sense that this was a different fight than the first fight, and that if he was even a step too far in or a step too far close, he was going to get caught. And that's exactly what happened. Not only did he get caught, he kind of stayed in there, lived by the sword, died by the sword, going out, guns blazing, as did Stipe on Saturday night, UFC 260 last weekend. He went out a champ, went out swinging, went out fighting. And that's what you could expect from a fighter the caliber of Stipe. Now, what's very disappointing is the fact that a lot of fight fans, I'm looking on Twitter, I'm looking on, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, all the social media apps, and fight fans are talking about Stipe like he's just chopped liver. What Stipe did for the UFC heavyweight division and as the UFC heavyweight champion, nobody has ever done that before. So whether Francis knocked out Stipe on Saturday night, UFC 260 or not, it doesn't take away what Stipe did for the division. He did a ton for the division. He did a lot for the division. It's just Francis's time. Finally, he becomes the next big thing. This is a polarizing, hulking figure in the sport that, since the days of Brock Lesnar as the UFC heavyweight champion, we have not seen the likes of a fighter like this. And I think more than anything, we haven't seen a fighter that has the skill set that Francis has for his size to have not just the power, but the hand speed. That is really what strikes me when looking at the size of Francis, seeing the hand speed that he has, seeing his ability to throw these 1-2 punches in close proximity, in very quick succession. His knockout of Andrei Arlovski. Francis is pulling one way to the right, fires the right hand, wallops Arlovski. In the Overeem fight, he pulls to the left, fires the left hand, wallops Overeem. He has this knack to pull back and fire uppercuts, pull back and fire these, shovel hooks or these, short hooks that are devastating shots. And in the sport of mixed martial arts, we are just so disrespectful to those that, create history. Right now we're singing Francis's praises, but if Francis ever does lose, he's yesterday's news. I see that a lot in fighting. When Daniel Cormier knocked out Stipe, it was almost as if Stipe was just kind of tossed aside, like he didn't really mean a whole lot to the UFC, like he didn't really mean a whole lot to, mixed martial arts. And I thought that was really unfair. But we're doing it again here with Stipe. We're doing it again here in the sense that Francis knocks him out. He's no longer the heavyweight champ. What's next for Stipe? I don't know. I feel like that's a really tough loss to come back from. Will he come back from it? I'm not sure. But one thing I do know is this is now Francis Ngannou's division. It's just the way the business works. When you have a new heavyweight champion, they get all that allure. They get all that attention. They get all the moxie, if you will, of being declared, quote unquote, the baddest man on the planet. So now, being that Francis didn't achieve this his first attempt, he's 34, he achieves it his second attempt over a 38, 39-year-old heavyweight champ. The time is now for Francis to really cash in and to really make the most of his name and to make the most of his career. And with that comes who is next, which, slightly, I feel is just slightly disrespectful to Stipe, but it is what it is. It's just the nature of the beast. It's the name of the game. We're always looking at what's next. Francis has so many options, and the best thing that a fighter could have is options. Okay, the best thing a fighter could have is options. So Francis, first off, we go through the options. The elephant in the room Is Ngannou versus Jones next? Is that the next fight for the UFC heavyweight title? I mean, I've watched this sport grow since 2002, 2003. There are fights that I say, this is the biggest fight in UFC history. This is the biggest fight in UFC history. Oh, wow. Now, this is the biggest fight in UFC history. I kid you not. I say this, no bones about it. World Heavyweight Championship. World Heavyweight Champion Francis Ngannou versus former UFC Light Heavyweight Champion Jon Jones is the biggest fight in the history of the mixed martial arts business. It is the biggest fight. There is no bigger fight. I think potentially this fight should surpass, some of the McGregor pay-per-views. Now, Conor McGregor, that's a whole nother discussion for another day. Conor McGregor is the biggest draw that the sport has. But in terms of the biggest fight, the most influential, consequential, momentous occasion of a fight, it's this one. Because the heavyweight title, it's got that prestigious allure. It just has that gravitas to it that attracts the casuals. Francis Ngannou is going to attract a ton of casuals. Jon Jones is one of the biggest names in this sport still. Despite all of his transgressions, despite every hiccup that he's had, he is still one of the biggest names in this sport. Love him, hate him, fair, unfair. It's just facts. So the question is this fight next? I hope so. I'll tell you that. I hope so. I'd love to see this fight. I think that it poses threats to both Francis and threats to Jon Jones as well, to both fighters. For Jon Jones to move right up to heavyweight and take on big bad Francis Ngannou for the UFC heavyweight title, that's nothing short of legendary. And for Ngannou's first title defense to face arguably the greatest fighter to ever wear a pair of 4-ounce gloves, it's just badass. The narrative of this fight is just simply badass, and I really hope that it happens. But we got a lot of I's to dot and a lot of T's to cross and a lot of, signatures that need to be signed on the bottom of the contract in order for that to happen, which brings me to my next point in the show. Jon Jones has demands. The demands are obvious. The demands are, I want more money to face Francis Ngannou. And let me paint this picture for you. Why does Jon Jones want more money to fight Francis Ngannou? We ask ourselves that. Why? Why does Jon Jones want more money to fight Francis? Well, it's a big fight. As I said, it's one of the biggest fights in UFC history. I think it should be one of the biggest fights in terms of, the consequences of the fight. Jones loses. What fallout would that create in the legacy of Jon Jones if he comes up short? If Francis loses and Jon Jones wins, what does that do to the whole GOAT conversation? It's a massive, massive fight. One that I think supersedes any recent McGregor fight, maybe since the days of Aldo versus McGregor. It's one of those rare opportunities that the UFC has ever had to put together a fight that really will stand the test of time, and one that they could put together 3 times over. Jones is 32, Ngannou is 34. I'd like to think that they're looking to make as much money as possible. They make this as the next, Ali Frazier-esque rivalry. Then yeah, it's a huge deal in mixed martial arts. It's a huge deal. So Jon Jones says, I want to get paid. I don't want $8 million. I don't want $9 million. I don't want $10 million. I want more than that. And let me tell you guys, this is a very tough situation because Jon Jones is right. He does deserve, in this point in his career, making this move, taking on Francis for the UFC heavyweight title, Jon Jones does deserve the pay that he wants. That's fine. Understandable. That's fair. But Jon Jones asking for that, that's where things get tricky. if this was Conor McGregor, if this was George St. Pierre, if this was Brock Lesnar, if this was Ronda Rousey, and they were facing a similar decision, moving up a weight class, taking on, a Cyborg or an Anderson Silva, or Brock's not moving up a weight class, for Pete's sake. Jeez, who could Brock move up to fight? But you get the point. If they were asked to do this, to move up, or actually not even asked, if they voluntarily did this, where Jones voluntarily decided, I'm going to move up a weight class, I'm going to gain a bunch of weight, get my body weight up, get my body muscle up. Jon Jones is at what, 245 now? So he's moving up a weight class. He's putting in the work, going from 205 to 245. He's not doing that for no reason. He's fighting either the winner of Stipe or in Ngannou. And I think, unfortunately for Jon Jones, he had the foresight to move up to heavyweight, but he didn't have the foresight to understand that not many fighters have cracked the quote-unquote fighter pay code in UFC history. There's really only been one guy that's been able to do it, and it's Conor McGregor, and it's pretty obvious as to why that is. There's only one. So Jon Jones has done a lot of things to hurt the UFC as a brand, as a company. And yeah, that has to be stated. I read a tweet from somebody, don't know who it was. I don't even remember their handle, but I just read a tweet that said, we can't continue to hold what Jon Jones has done over his life and his personal life against him within his career. We can't, I guess. We can't. We're fans. We can have our own opinions. But that's not the problem. It's not the fans that are actually holding it against Jon Jones. The fans have rewarded Jon Jones. The fans have allowed Jon Jones to come back. If the fans said, we don't want to see Jon Jones fight, Jon Jones' career would be over. But people still want to see Jon Jones fight. He's a talented fighter. He can do a lot of crazy things inside the octagon, and the UFC wants him wearing their gloves. I think matchup-wise, fight-wise, X's and O's wise, styles make fights wise, looking at Jon Jones and his demands, the question is not necessarily whether or not Jon Jones and his demands are valid. It's why. Why is Jones demanding? He wants more money because it's a big fight. He wants more money because it's a big fight, and he knows it's a fight that he could potentially lose. If he's going to put his legitimately undefeated record, she's not undefeated on the record sheet, but he is undefeated. He's never actually lost. His only loss was a disqualification loss to Matt Hamill for legal 12-6 elbow strikes. If Jon is going to put that record on the line, he's going to get paid for it. Jon is going to put that record on the line and get paid for it. He's going to do it against a guy that he could possibly lose to. I mean, Francis is the toughest matchup that Jon has ever faced in his career by a country mile. And that's no disrespect to Alexander Gustafsson or Dominic Reyes or, Teixeira or Rampage or Chael or any of the guys that he's fought and defended that UFC light heavyweight title against. But Francis Ngannou is a special fighter, as is Jon Jones. And that's what makes the fight so entertaining. But I've never seen a heavyweight move like Francis Ngannou. Never seen a heavyweight land the punches that Francis is able to land. I've never seen a heavyweight throw the punches that Francis is able to throw. So he is a special fighter, the next big thing. And, it's frustrating that what could prohibit this fight from happening is the question that has hung over the UFC for years. And it's this one simple phrase, 2 words: fighter pay. Fighter pay. Fighter pay is becoming more of a problem now than it ever has before. And the reason for that is the sport has gained more notoriety. The sport has transformed itself 3 times over the last 20 years. Name one sport that has evolved more than mixed martial arts the last 15, 20, 25 years. You can't. You can't even say football. You can't even say baseball. You can't even say hockey. 25 years ago, mixed martial arts was barely on television. Now it's on ESPN. It was on Fox. So, in that respect, different fans have flocked to the sport. Different demographics have flocked to the sport the last few years. Different audiences are kind of picked out over the last 25 years that the UFC never thought were possible. With that should come more money. This company sold for $4.25 billion. Now you have WME IMG buying pretty much every ownership stake in the company, which is a multi-billion-dollar entity in and of itself. And the UFC releases these tiers for the new UFC apparel line, Venom. And you got fighter A making $4,000, fighter B making $8,000, fighter. Let me put it to you this way: in terms of the high paying contracts that are levied, pushed out by Venom, $42,000 for a championship fight for these fighters from Venom. $42,000 each. 42,000. Not 4 million. Not 420,000. 42,000. That's embarrassing. It's embarrassing that this sport has grown to the level that it has, and fighter pay is still as much of a problem as it is. And the only way that this problem is going to change is if prominent enough fighters, Conor McGregor, Jon Jones, even former fighters, George St. Pierre, Habib, if they all come together and say, we need to unionize, like the NFL did with the Players Association, like baseball has with the Players Union with Tony Clark running the show in that department of things. That's the only way things are going to change for the UFC. And it's sad to an extent that these fighters feel so controlled as quote unquote independent contractors that they can't really speak their own minds without feeling like they're going to lose their spot. It's almost like they're being held hostage to their contracts. So, fighter pay in mixed martial arts is probably, I think, the biggest problem with the sport right now. And to say that this is the biggest problem, that's me saying that there are other problems as well, but this one, without a doubt, is still a problem because the sport is making more money now than it ever has. And it's made more money than it ever has the last, 5-6 years. Why has the result of fighter pay remained the same? Why hasn't that changed? Well, greed, I think a little bit of corruption, and I think a lot of ignorance in terms of the people, the powers that be. They don't want anything to change because then their cut is smaller. But it's just not right. And when you have Jon Jones as the guy saying that this is a problem, that's when things are bad, because Jon Jones has, for lack of a better term, really only looked out for himself over the course of his career. When you got him saying, okay, I want more money for Francis Ngannou, and they won't even pay that guy the money that he wants for the Francis Ngannou fight, to give the fans a fight that they it's almost bang my chin, is to give the fans a fight that they really want. They won't even do that for Jon Jones, who is, MMA royalty in terms of what he has done in the octagon. Outside of the octagon, not so much, obviously, but I mean, at some point, they've already made their bed with Jon Jones. Now they got to lay in it. And if Jon Jones wants more money for this fight, the fans want this fight. And I guarantee you more fans want this fight to see Jon Jones get knocked out than they do to see Jon Jones win. That's part of the fight game as well. I'll be watching Ben Askren versus Jake Paul. I'm not watching Ben Askren and Jake Paul to see Jake Paul knock out Ben Askren. I want to see Ben Askren smash Jake Paul. Why do you think Floyd Mayweather's pay-per-view numbers are so big for so many years? People weren't tuning in to see him win. They weren't fans. They wanted to see who could possibly take out Floyd Mayweather. And to his credit, nobody ever did. So that's why this fight is so big. And if Jon Jones wants more money, I think the UFC has to give it to him, to make this fight happen. He's put in the work on his end to gain the muscle mass that he needs to move up to heavyweight. If this is the case, which it is, he's moved up, he's gained the weight, then the UFC's got to meet him halfway. I think eventually what will happen is they will meet halfway, and I think Jon said that himself in an interview. I think this fight will happen. If you were to ask me today, do you think Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou will happen? I think it will, and main reason why, and this is another reason why the UFC is so much bigger than boxing and mixed martial arts as a whole is bigger than boxing, is the sense that mixed martial arts fans ask for a fight. They, more oftentimes than not, they get it. If not the moment they ask for it, shortly thereafter. In boxing, you guys know the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight took 6-7 years to make. Fight took way too long to make, and it happened when both guys were arguably past their prime. So, here I'm saying that Manny's still fighting and Floyd's retired, but there are not many exceptions to that rule. Father time. But I think that this fight will happen. It's too big. Now, will it happen next? That's the big question. Will it happen in the next 3-4 months when Francis wants to fight again? Because I do think Francis will be fighting again soon. I don't think so. I think what will happen, the negotiation will kind of come to a standstill. There'll be tons of frustration. Jon Jones will verbally bash Dana White worse than he ever has. And the UFC will eventually cave and somewhat give Jon close to what he wants, but not quite what he wants. And we'll see that fight at the end of the year, at the end of 2021. And Francis will fight Derek Lewis and probably knock him out. And I love Derek Lewis, but Francis Ngannou is the closest thing to Mike Tyson that mixed martial arts has ever had in terms of a phenom-esque power puncher for his size, to move the way that he does, to land the punches that he does. It's just unbelievable. So mixed martial arts news as well. We do have some news as far as UFC news, that Dustin Poirier has signed his contract. Dustin Poirier signed that contract to fight Conor McGregor for the third time, finishing off the trilogy, the rubber match. McGregor got the first one. Poirier got the second one in January. It's looking like July 10th is the date, per Ariel Helwani, that Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor will step back into the UFC octagon and fight one another. This was a trilogy that Dustin Poirier wanted. This was a trilogy that Conor McGregor wanted. It's a trilogy that I wanted, that you wanted, that everything it. Did I think it would be immediately? No, I didn't, but I'm happy that it is. Conor is reportedly obsessed with the idea of this trilogy fight, wants to right that wrong, get this one back, and Dustin Poirier wants to prove that he is the better fighter between himself and Conor. And, man, to me, when I look at McGregor and Poirier, one guy has evolved immensely in Dustin Poirier. The other guy, in Conor, has somewhat devolved in the sense that he's achieved the success that he has. He's got the money. He's got the fame. He's got everything that he's ever wanted. So that when you have everything that you've ever wanted, that hunger is kind of gone. You've kind of filled your belly, so to speak. You can't eat anymore. You were hungry at one point. You were starving. And then all of a sudden you got all the food you wanted, all the desserts, all the drinks, everything. And after a while, you get kind of sick of it, and you're like, "Well, what's next? What's my real motive here in this whole situation?" And I think that's where Conor has been. Now, the question is, that's where he has been. Is that where he still is? I think anytime Conor has lost, he does show this sense of humbleness and the sense of pride, and the fact that he wants that rematch right away, and he's willing to give the props to the opponent that takes him on and beats him, whether it was Nate, whether it was Dustin, whether it was Floyd. You can say a lot of things about Conor McGregor, but the way he handles himself in a loss is, I think, what makes him the champion that he was. He has to get that back, and the way to get it back is to just simply go back, and I'm taking a line from Rocky III here, to go back to the beginning. Go back to when you had nothing. Go back to when you were at that point where your hunger was at an all-time high. You wanted to achieve the fame, the fortune, everything. I think Conor's got to go out of his comfort zone. He's got to go into a place where the only thing he's focused on is fighting. And for Conor McGregor to do that, given the name that he is in a lot of other entities now outside of fighting, that's a very tough thing to do. So it's almost like his success as a fighter and his success as a businessman primarily has put a hindrance on his fighting career. I hope I'm wrong with that, because I do hope and anticipate that we will see a really competitive trilogy fight between Poirier and McGregor, and the adjustments that McGregor needs to make, the adjustments that Poirier has made over the course of his career. I think we're going to see a really good fight. I can't even predict a winner on it, but the fact that McGregor versus Poirier 3 is most likely for July, I'm pretty thrilled with that. I'm pretty happy, and I'm excited that the fight fans will get the chance to see that this summer after a really crappy summer last year due to COVID-19. So there you have it. That is the mixed martial arts version of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, the UFC 260 post-fight reaction show. Francis Ngannou finally becomes the next big thing. And, Vicente Luque, he wins a big co-main event against Tyron Woodley. That was Woodley's 4th straight loss in a row. I'm thinking that Woodley's career with the UFC at the very least is done. Whether his mixed martial arts career is over remains to be seen. But, hey, to the UFC, I'm not saying this to get Jon Jones' money. I'm saying this so I could see Francis versus Jon Jones. I want to see Francis and Jon Jones go head to head, toe to toe, and I want to see fighters get paid properly across all tiers of experience and all that stuff. I just want to see them be paid properly, and I feel like the Venom deal doesn't do a whole lot towards making that happen, which is a real shame. I'm Ryan Thomas. Thank you for tuning into the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Take care, everybody.